And welcome back. Hopefully by now we've had our Zoom meeting, and this will be the second set of 4 videos, and we will get ourselves through them. The first set of 4 videos was more about you as the first responder to the critical incident debriefing, and as a first responder. This second set will be more about the people that we're trying to help, the people that we're trying to identify, the people that we're going to be responding to as critical incident debriefers. So we'll move right on with that. And just so you know, in the room we have Josh and Bucky are both here so that we can all kind of share in this. I know that we've kind of been on PowerPoint overload for the first session, so we're going to try and back off the PowerPoint just a bit. And this series of 4 will have a few more videos. Just a little caution, some of these videos have real life content and they could be a little rough, so just bear that in mind. They used to call the demobilization was the term that they used in CISM. They stopped doing that because what they found was in the military, demobilization meant something totally different, like clean up the war zone type thing and remove the troops, and that's not what we're trying to do.
Break down camp.
Break down camp. Well, we're not breaking down camp. So they've kind of changed it to Rest, Information, and Transition Services, or RITS. So you'll still hear people refer to it as a demobilization. It's not that that's a bad word. It's just it had 2 different meanings. And because CISM is worldwide now, they didn't, and often used with the military, they didn't want confusion between the 2 terms. So that's why they changed it. So in this series today, or in this video today, we're going to go over the different types. So we'll talk about each of the interventions and maybe just a brief synopsis of what that intervention entails. A little less brief than last week, but not totally detailed. When we do a RITS, or a Rest Information Transition, that's going to be for the directly involved first responders, the people that are at the scene. It's usually a large group of people. It's usually at the end of either the event or the shift. It's event driven, so we wouldn't have it just deciding, oh, hey, we're going to schedule a demobilization next week. It's going to be driven by that event and done at the end of the shift of that event.
That would require either people to be on scene already or a CISM team member to be called out to it?
Yes. We would need to be called to the scene, preferably, so that we have an idea of what's going on at the scene. And we would want to know a little bit about what's going on and make sure that we can catch the people before they leave. People that are traditionally going to have trouble are going to be the ones that bolt. So we want to catch them before they bolt. What we're trying to do there is relay information. We've all been in situations where we could watch the same event occur from different perspectives and all walk away thinking something different happened. How many times have we done that in a conversation? We walk away from a conversation and one person thinks that this, and this was talked about, and the other person goes, wow, we really talked about that, and that. So part of what we want to do with this is get everybody on the same page with accurate information so that when they go home, they are armed with the right information instead of, well, I don't really know what Johnny did. I don't know why we did this or that, or did they even bother to take that person to the hospital? We want to get that information out there. We want to allow people to decompress a little. If they need to vent a bit, let them. If they need to just talk among themselves, we want to let them do that. We want to discuss some of the stress management techniques that we talked about in the first 4 videos. But again, briefly, this whole thing shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. This is not a long, drawn-out thing. We want to get them the basic information so we're all on the same page. We want to allow them a little chance to vent, and I can tell you that most people don't. They'll talk among themselves, but most people really don't have a lot to say. They're tired. They've had a long day. This event has been traumatic or we wouldn't be there, and they want to go home. So we want to let them. We want to send them home having taken a look at them. We want to send them home knowing that they're on the same page, and we want to encourage them to get some rest. So that's what that is. And we do it near the scene. So this is a little more detailed information about it and a couple pictures. Back to the same thing, I'm not going to read all the PowerPoints ad nauseum, but it's the same basic thing. I say it's 30 minutes. About 10 minutes of that is us giving them the accurate information, and that's going to be a support team member, just giving them the basic information. The rest, 20 minutes, feed them something, because everybody's probably hungry, wants something to eat. They may or may not want to eat, but the food's going to be available to them to eat. And they can just talk, and we want to be present. We're not leading a conversation. It's not formal. We're there in the room. We can sit and talk with them. We can leave them alone. But that's basically the 30 minutes, is 10 minutes of us talking, 20 minutes of them relaxing. One of the important things when we're doing this RITS is as they arrive, and when I say arrive, they're on scene, but like if we were doing it in this room, as they come in the room, we want somebody jotting down names of who these people are that are coming in, not because we're going to keep that, not because we're keeping track of who was there for, later so we can check back. We're doing that because we want to make sure if we had 15 people at that scene, we want to make sure that we get 15 people in the room with us, so that nobody snuck out the door and went home and we're not paying attention to Johnny, because Johnny might be the one that needed help and Johnny said, screw that, I'm not going in there, and got in his car and drove away. We won't know that unless we're kind of keeping track of who comes in. So we don't do it officially like name, rank, serial number, sign in. We do it more somebody that knows the people that are involved to kind of check off, okay, yeah, everybody that should be here is here. Does that
You're
make sense?
talking about doing this in a building, like right after the event. So if you were in like a Tasca apartment, so this is something you do outside? You'd have to actually find a building, or?
You could do it outside if you could have a place for people to eat.
Okay.
Because
it has to be separated.
Yeah, you wouldn't want it, if it, and I'm trying to think of it, you said a Tasca, you mean like a big fire?
Well, I don't know, yeah.
If let's say we had a big fire at a Tasca and for whatever reason we were doing a demobilization, or I just said it, didn't I? We're doing a RITS. Because of that, then maybe we would try and find one of the little pavilions there.
Okay.
Just something where they can, again, we're talking about rest.
Yeah.
If everybody has to stand for that 30 minutes, well, that's a lot of standing.
Yeah.
And it's
so you want to do this close to a scene, but not right on top of the scene.
Correct.
And you still have to be able to provide an environment. So as long as you don't have 15 people traveling 30 miles away to a designated spot, is better if we have a place 3 miles away.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then everybody knows how to get there. You may, and restaurants have always been very cooperative. Mm-hmm. A church, cooperative, just some building that you could say, hey, can we gather for about 30 minutes in your back room? Yeah. And that would be perfect. You just want a place that's conveniently located to the scene, so that we're not telling people, oh, drive all the way across town and meet us. Yeah. So they're going to spend 40 minutes driving to a location, so we can tell them to rest and go home.
Right.
Kind of doesn't make good sense. So does that answer that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
The food should be in a separate room from the informational part, and that's just what they have found is if we sit in here and we're giving this information, the person is giving this information, then that tends to be kind of more formal, and then nobody wants to change over in their mind, if you will, to informal, let's sit and chat and eat. They still feel like, well, this is formal. Gee, I don't know if I really want to grab that sandwich. Mm-hmm. It's just hard to get people to do that. Whereas if you say, okay, we're all done, we're going to have you go, next door or outside or under the pavilion or whatever, where there's some food for you.
Now, is that a deal breaker if that isn't available at the time, or just a suggestion if possible?
Suggested if possible. Okay. There's no deal breakers. Okay. Well, actually, there are some deal breakers, and we'll talk about that later on. There's definitely some, we don't want to do that.
Right.
But no, these are all ideal scenarios. Yep. If we can make these happen this way, then this is what we have found works the best. At the end, their commander or the supervisor at the scene is who should release them. It shouldn't be us, because we're unofficial. As the peer support, we're part of them. We shouldn't be the ones now taking on the role of we're the boss and we're going to tell you to go home. We want their boss to tell them that. And it's nice, especially as we have good relationships with the bosses.
And the boss won't be there, so the boss is going to have to be notified when we're buttoned up.
Or whoever he designates.
Right.
Somebody should formally tell them, go home. Reinforce what these people have said, do the things that these people have asked, use these techniques, and go home. That's, what we want to do. That's also a good time for that person to remind them, depending on what the scenario is, if we have decided as peer support that we need to do a debriefing, then that's when they would tell them, hey, we're scheduling a debriefing, it's going to be this day, or we're scheduling a debriefing, we're not sure, but we will be contacting you about what day, what time, where we're going to do that. That would be a good time to just bring that up. So it's already, that seed is planted, so that when we do call them and say, hey, we're doing a debriefing tomorrow at 7 p.m., they're not going, what the hell, we did that RITS thing, well, what are we doing now? When we're doing that, there's a good time to bring that up. Sure. And then let me go back. When we as peer support, I know Josh's finger's on the button, he wants to go. When we're doing the peer support, we always stay, we're the last to leave, because we've all been in the situation. There's that person that wants to ask a question, but they don't want to do it in front of everybody. But if we're hanging around in a kind of casual mode, as all the peers leave, that's when they're going to come up and maybe ask a question that they were afraid to ask.
So put us in a position where we're
casually hanging around, cleaning up, doing whatever it is we're doing, and we happen to be there for them. The CMB, which is the Crisis Management Briefing, and it is still called a CMB. It can be used for any event in the community that has an impact on the community. This could be the school shooting, the tornado, the aircraft accident, the fire. Yeah, because Bucky's had a traumatic fire event, and we'll just talk about that later. You can the CMB is the one event that we can do multiple times, so for the same event. So we might have an event that is either so large in scope or geographically it's spread out like a natural disaster. It's spread out in so many different locations that it's not practical to tell all those people, okay, everybody get in your car and let's all go to downtown Park Rapids where we're going to have the CMB. That might not be practical. So we may do, and we're just making this up, let's say a tornado went through and it hit all the way through up from 2 inlets down to Monaga. We may do a CMB up at 2 inlets. We may do a CMB down in Monaga. We may do a CMB in Park Rapids, just because it's geographically more convenient for the people that are involved, and that citizens would be involved as well. They usually take about 20 to 45 minutes, but they can last as much as an hour to 2 hours, depending on how many people. You can get up to 200 people that would be involved in that. And so there's a lot of leeway. It's probably the most flexible of the interventions, and it's probably, I'm going to say, least intrusive, hopefully, that you understand the meaning of that. I don't mean that any of these are intrusive, but the CMB is probably the most, gosh guys, what word am I looking for here? Informal, maybe? It would be the most informal of the interventions, but it's also a positive impact for the community, because it gets back to that, everybody gets on the same page. The idea is what we want to provide for them is information. In the case of a natural event, we want to talk to them about hazards. That gosh, this came through, and if you drive down where the roads used to be, there may not be any street signs, and there's probably all kinds of debris in the road, so you're probably going to pop your tires. We may be able to tell them the things that they may not have thought of. We want to stop a lot of the rumors and misinformation. So it's a good opportunity, even in the different locations, we want to make sure the information we're providing is the same. So we don't want to tell the people up in 2 inlets, yada, 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 and then in Monaga we tell them something totally different. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page. What we're trying to do is reduce chaos. We're trying to reduce misinformation and some hostility. A lot of times in a crisis event, we find that there's hostility because of misinformation. That because somebody said or did something, and that person told a friend who told a friend who told a friend who told a friend, and by the time it got back around, well, that person called so-and-so an asshole at the scene and blamed the whole thing on them. And it's like, That didn't happen at all. We want to stop all that. We want to get in front of it. It also provides some follow-up or referral information so we can tell people, if this occurred, if you're having medical problems because of this, here are some resources that you can have. If your cattle are free because your fences all got torn down in this, here's maybe some resources that we can give to people to kind of help them. It certainly helps community morale and camaraderie when we can get together like that. Questions about that? CMB? Questions?
No, I'm sure you'll cover this in more detail as we go along, just how different that is.
We will.
Yeah, this is just an introduction to it. So all my questions, I'm sure, will be answered later by our expert.
You're so funny, Josh. We're going to go to diffusing now. And
I'll get back to you on that.
I'll get back to you on that. Who's involved in the diffusing? It's the small group of first responders. We do not mix groups in this, so we wouldn't have, say, like a school shooting, and I hate to keep using that, but they've been all over the country. We wouldn't put the civilians and the first responders in the same room to do a diffusing or a debriefing. A diffusing or debriefing for first responders is only first responders. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll talk about a lot of those reasons as we get into some examples and practicing some of these techniques. But basically, it's because first responders tend to be a close-knit group of people.
Black humor.
We have that dark humor, and we have different coping mechanisms.
It's dark humor now. It used to be
Black.
black humor. Now it's dark humor.
I'm just going to skip over that like it didn't even get said, and I'm just going to move right on down here. We have a different coping system, and if we mix civilians with that, they may or may not understand that. And first responders may be very hesitant to come forth with emotion or their opinions if there are civilians in there. So we just don't mix them. It's a pretty simple rule. Usually we want to do a diffusing within an hour to 3 hours of the event. The latest would be 8 to 12 hours of the event. But pretty much what you want to do is before the people go home, whenever this event happened, if they're midnight shift, it'd be before 7 o'clock in the morning before they go home to go to bed. That's kind of the way to think about it, is before these people go home and go to bed to sleep on this, we want to have a diffusing so that we can get all the correct information out there, or at least as correct as we know it at that time. So everybody has the same information. What we're trying to do is mitigate the symptoms. We're trying to triage. In other words, when we're having this diffusing, it's going to be 20 to 45 minutes long. Usually 30 minutes is a good avenue for it. It gives us a good opportunity to look around the room and kind of go, who's struggling? Or if we have somebody there in a supervisory position or a position of trust, that we can say, do you see somebody in particular that we should be paying extra attention to, that we can catch that person before they go and maybe have a little one-on-one discussion with them. And that gives us the opportunity to do that. This can be at the scene if there's a place at the scene that can be neutral. In other words, if it's a school shooting, we're not going to be in a classroom where there were people killed. That doesn't make any sense at all. If we can find a place that's neutral without distractions, that's where we want to be. That's where we want to do this. Homogeneous groups, that's where it goes back to what I was saying, is homogeneous would be first responders, no civilians. It's not, everybody has a shared history with each other. We have a shared work environment. Usually we've worked together. There's an established bond. While I might not know Timmy personally, but Timmy's a cop, and I know the other cops, and the other cops know Timmy, and so that gives Timmy some familiarity. So it doesn't mean that I necessarily know every person in the room. It means that I have a bond with every person in that room. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. You have something in common with them that you can relate with.
Yes.
Yep.
And a credibility and trust that goes with that.
And that's going to be true for most of ours because we're not providing this service to the public at large unless it was really, really warranted. But
correct.
95% of our is going to be for first responders.
About the only thing that I could see that we might do is a CMV. You know, we could certainly probably assist if a major event came through. We would probably be better able to assist whomever it would be it the mayor or the sheriff or whoever that has to address the public, we might be able to help assist them with doing that, and maybe, giving some hints, tips, whatever. We could probably do that. And that's all I see us doing. As far as debriefings and diffusings for the general public, that's not our purview, because remember, it's peer support leaded. Those are not our peers.
Right.
And led. That's the word I was looking for. It's peer support led, and we're not their peers. So they would need peers, like at a school. I go back to that just because it's in the news all the time. You would want that led by someone in the education field, because that's where that credibility is going to come from. So that's who you would want leading that. Basically, a diffusing it's kind of a shortened version of a debriefing. You need a minimum of 2 peer support people to have a diffusing. That's a minimum. You would never want to try and do it on your own. It doesn't work. It causes a lot more problems. We're trying to mitigate the effects of the event, and if one person is there trying to do everything, it just causes more stress. Our goal is to accelerate the recovery process. Everybody recovers at a different rate, and what we're hoping with the diffusing is that we can speed that up, that we can give people the tools and the information they need. And what we have found through experience is a lot of times if we do a really good job with the diffusing, we don't even need to do a debriefing. That's enough, that everybody's okay. Debriefing, this is the big one. When CISM started, it was called CISD, because it was Critical Incident Stress Debriefing, and that's what we called it. And then everybody realized it's so much more than that. We have all these other interventions. So it became CISM for Critical Incident Stress Management, because again, debriefing is one of the interventions in the big picture of managing stress. And so we want to do a debriefing within 1 to 10 days of the event. 1 is pretty close. It's almost impossible to get it arranged, to get just logistically get everybody in the same room at the same time to do it in 1 day. So generally it's 2 to 3 days, but you don't want it to go over 10 days. Beyond 10 days, people have already started to heal in their way. They've already started to cope with it. And if they're doing well and coping with it, why do we want to bring them back in and bring it all up again and start that process all over again? So after 10 days, we would probably switch to doing a one-on-one if it became necessary, and not do a debriefing, because we don't want to bring everybody back in and re-traumatize them. It just doesn't seem to be a good idea to do that. The difference between a debriefing and a diffusing in making that decision is usually symptom driven. In other words, either people have voiced that it seems like people are kind of struggling. If common sense would tell us, people are probably struggling, then that's when we would decide that we need to do a debriefing. If everybody's doing fine and the diffusing was enough, then we leave it at that and we don't go forward for the debriefing. The briefing is usually 1 to 3 hours long. We try really hard not to go over 3 hours. Occasionally it can, but one of the things in a debriefing that we'll find is we don't give breaks. If people have to go tinkle, then they go tinkle, but they come back. So if you go over 3 hours, that's a long time to sit people in a room with no breaks. So we really don't want it to go over 3 hours, and it can become stressful for everybody to do that.
So you gotta watch how engaged they are. And if they're still really engaged and going at the 3 hour mark,
We are not cutting them off.
we're not cutting them off.
Correct.
We're not trying to wind them down. Let them go till they start winding down. Let that be our signal.
Yes.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't usually, that would probably be
As rare as
unusual
it is,
circumstances, right? And we would want to monitor that pretty careful, because if it's just one person that's going on and on and on and on and on, we may want to end it politely and professionally, and then carry on in a one-on-one capacity with that person.
Right.
But if everybody is interacting, we're certainly not going to say,
Right.
yeah, okay, we're done.
Because they're being polite and letting them go on, and they're getting burnt out.
Right. And then they're
More
probably
damage
getting
than good.
agitated
Yeah.
because they're like, You know, would so-and-so just shut up?
Every Sunday morning.
Yeah,
Well, Josh, we
yeah.
weren't going to say anything, you know.
Recognition is the first. That's the first step of healing.
Did you recognize that because of some of the things that we went through in the last videos? I'm just curious.
No, but that's true. When you have one person going on and on and on, it's like, I just want to, like, you just get more uncomfortable and angry. You're just like, I don't want to be here. So yeah, it's good for us to be able to recognize some of that thing, and you know, this is helping or this is not helping, or this is only helping one person, or they think it's only helping them. But
And what we do, it's very hard because when we're doing a debriefing and we're sitting in our little circle, and we'll talk a lot about our little circle, when we're doing a debriefing and we're sitting in our little circle and we have completed everything that we're supposed to complete, we've gone through all 7 stages, often people would be sitting there going, okay, well, what now? You know, and you don't really want to say, okay, you're dismissed. So usually what will happen is the team members, the peer support people that are there, will stand and say, hey, we've got some free refreshments over here. And that kind of ends the meeting. And if somebody were that person that was going on and on and on and on, then we would, whoever's leading it would let the other team members, because they're going to be well aware of what's going on, know, oh, yeah, the food's ready? Yeah, well, these guys are going to show you where that is. And then that person leading the meeting or another peer support can stay with that one person, continue a dialogue with them, but everybody else can go start refreshments. And so does that make sense as far as, that's kind of how we would deal with that, instead of saying, okay, you've talked enough, you know, we're just going to stop this right now. We don't want to shut them down, because if they need to talk, maybe they need to talk. Or maybe they just have diarrhea of the mouth. We don't really know, but we'll figure it out. That would be in a neutral environment. Again, not something you want to do at the scene, because the scene may be a reminder.
Yeah.
We'll find a location that's close. We're scheduling this. So it may be, if it's something that involves the fire department, we may be able to use the firehouse, you know, because they're comfortable there. That's a comfortable environment for them.
It's a safe zone.
You know, if it's something that occurred in town, and the police are involved, we may be able to do it at the police station, dispatch conference room, here at the church. You know, we'll find a location because we're scheduling that. You know, we have time is on our side, but we want a place that's neutral. In other words, it's not an emotional place. It's not where the event occurred. It's not, you know, the memorial room at the police station or wherever, you know, that has plaques all over the wall about dead people. Yeah, that's really not really where we want to do that. And we want it to be a place where there's no distractions, where we don't have phones ringing all the time, or we don't have people walking in and out. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, we don't want that to occur, because every one of those distractions breaks what's going on in the room. CISD is an intervention of CISM. They are not independent of each other. In other words, CISD isn't standalone and CISM is something else. CISD, Critical Incident Stress Debriefing, is a part of Critical Incident Stress Management. CISD was designed as a support service, and again, as everything, it evolved, and they realized, okay, it's so much more than just a debriefing. We have all these other things that we need to do, and we've said it 1,000,000 times, and we'll say it 1,000,002 times, or maybe we'll go for 1,000,000,000, or even 1,000,000,000,000. It's not psychotherapy, not a substitute for psychotherapy. We are not psychologists. We are not therapists. That's for the mental health people. They're the professionals there. And it's not a standalone intervention. We would never do a debriefing, and then just let it go. When we do a debriefing, we will follow up with the people that were involved. Even if that follow-up is just a quick phone call that says, hey, how you doing? You know, or hey, how'd it go? You know, we've done a few of those now, just a little feedback. You know, we want to check in on those people, follow up in some way with them, not say, well, you know, I really want to get into therapy here, and how are you feeling? Tell me about that. You know what I'm trying to say? We just want to follow up.
So a scenario, if I decide to call someone, I should make sure I have enough time. Don't give them a call when I'm almost to work, just to check in case they do want to talk.
That would be a good idea.
Give yourself, make sure you have time in case they do want to talk a little bit, that time's available to you.
Absolutely. especially because typically, well, what will happen, I'm skipping ahead just a little here, but you made a really good point. We have the debriefing, and we've stood up and we've given them the water and light snacks that we had there, and everybody's sort of leaving, a couple at a time, they all leave, and we're the last people there because we're waiting to the bitter end. Then what we will do together, just us, is have a little, don't want to call it a debriefing among the debriefers, but we want to have a little chat among ourselves. Did anybody notice anybody that seemed to be struggling? Did anybody notice anything that we did wrong? Did we skip a step? Did we, we kind of critique ourselves and how the meeting went so that we have a good idea. And when we're doing that, that's when we might say, yeah, Cindy Lou, kind of all of us agree that Cindy Lou looked like she was really having a problem. So then we would say, hey, Bucky, do you mind tomorrow? Kind of we're assigning you, do you have time to call Cindy Lou and check back with her? Or the only thing that we will break confidentiality is if somebody is a threat of harm to themselves or somebody else. And, we discuss confidentiality a lot. And one of the things that we say is we'll never break confidentiality. At the beginning of any debriefing, we will say the only time we will break confidentiality is if we feel somebody is a threat to themselves or someone else. If someone tells us in there that they're suicidal or homicidal, then we have a duty to act on that. And we're not breaking their confidence because we told them that's what we're going to do. Yeah. And we will, that person, if we suspect that, or if they have said that, we will hold them back at the end of the meeting and have more conversation with them anyway. But definitely we're going to not only be following up one-on-one, but that's where we would probably go to their department head and say, there's a serious problem here and we need to address this. Because we certainly don't want to let somebody go off that has basically told us they're going to commit suicide or they're thinking about committing suicide, and we go, okay, well, go get some rest. See how you're feeling tomorrow.
Have a fruit snack.
Have a little snack. You've got some Kool-Aid. Yeah. Jonestown Kool-Aid, is that? No.
Well, that would definitely keep them from being suicidal. I mean, homicidal.
Homicidal. Yeah. So, did that kind of answer that?
That answered it, and then some, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I would just make sure you have time in case they do want to talk, that you don't, because then you're stuck.
Right.
I got to cut you off now. I got something else going on.
Right. Which
would be an insult.
Right.
So.
Yeah, this is really important to me, but I gotta go.
Yeah.
Gotta go. And that might be where if you found that, let's say, because life is life, and if something did occur, that may be where you call another team member or support member and you say, hey, I had to go. Can you give Cindy Lou a call back?
Right.
Just so there's a continued follow-up. Again, that's a homogeneous group. We would not mix different groups in together. This needs to be a group of people that trust each other. In a large environment where you would have, I can't even think of what the environment would be, but I think in a small town your groups are gonna be more mixed. In other words, in Tampa, you might only have police officers in one room, and you may do a second debriefing for just firefighters because of the number of people. Here, I think because everybody works so closely together, you're fine mixing those groups because they still are used to working with each other. It is a tight-knit group, even though they might not all wear the same uniform. Does that make sense?
So, let's just say, and I don't know because I haven't been to enough of them, but you would. On any, let's just say, run-of-the-mill accident, a 2-car accident, maybe a fatality, about how many people are you going to have involved in something like that? Probably 3 EMTs or 4?
Depending on the call, but yeah, you're going to have 2 ambulance drivers per ambulance, 2 to 3 law enforcement, maybe 4 with state patrol, and if fire's involved, you're going to have 100 firemen.
First responders.
And then you'll have a handful of first responders. So yeah, you could easily end up with a half dozen of each entity involved, and that's if we don't go into the hospitals and stuff like that.
Right.
If we transport a critical to the hospital, it goes bad there. It all depends.
So a couple dozen people in total, but most of those people know each other because you're going to get called to the same kinds of things.
And you can do a debriefing with 30 people.
Yeah.
As long as it's a homogeneous group. you can do that. You just wouldn't want to mix people that don't even know each other.
Right.
You know,
This accident happened outside of Arnold's house, and so he wants to show up.
yeah, Arnold's
Right.
not coming in.
Yeah.
You know, unless Arnold happens to be one of the first responders that was on scene.
Right. Yeah.
Arnold's not coming in because he's not part of that group. And so we can talk to Arnold, certainly if he's upset or whatever, but
That's separate.
that's a totally different
Yeah.
thing, and that's just us being kind. That has nothing to do with peer support, because he's not a peer for us. Groups should have prior positive relationships. We stress that only in that if we know that there's difficulty between Group A and Group B, we really don't want to put them in the same room to do a debriefing because it's not going to go well. You know, it's going to turn into a shouting match. So if we become aware of the fact that, you know, if the fire chief or the police chief says, yeah, we've had, you know, right now,
There's some animosity.
there's some serious animosity going on right now. You know, there's a paramedic that sued the police department or whatever.
Right.
There's something going on right now. We need to be aware of that because we're not going to put those people in the same room to do a debriefing because it likely won't go well.
What
And
if
I'm
it was
just
just
making
one
that scenario.
person? What if it was like this person's being a real pain? Like most of the group is with us, but this person. Would the chief be able to say like, we're not going to go if that person's in the room, or can you not be held hostage like that?
You know, in all the years I've been doing this, that scenario hasn't come up.
Okay.
I would say every scenario you have to look at individually at the scenario, because certainly every scenario under the sun has occurred. But I think you would have to individually make a decision. Why do you think that person shouldn't be in the room? If it's just because, well, we don't really like them, that's probably not a good enough reason to say they're out of there. But if there's something, well, they're going through a nasty divorce right now, we really don't want to put the two of them in the room together in this environment because they're going through a nasty divorce right now. You could see how that could go terribly bad.
Yeah.
Or this has occurred, this person is having an affair with that person's spouse. Yeah, that's not going to go over well. You know, you need to exclude them. One or both of them you need to exclude. What we're trying to do is we're trying to facilitate getting people back to normal, whatever normal is for them. We're just the facilitators as support. We're not the psychotherapists. We're there as peers to try and facilitate getting them tools to get back to normal. And normal for everybody is different. The time to get back to normal for some people, the next day they're fine. For some people, 2 weeks. On average, they say about a month. You know, from a traumatic event, in about a month, you should be getting back to normal. Does that mean you're over it and you're never going to think about it again? No. It just means that you're able to function normally. Am I missing? Oh, there is somebody there. And again, what we're doing in the debriefing is we're identifying individuals that we may need to reach out to, because we're not just going to say, okay, the briefing's done, we're out of here, we've done our job. You've had your Twinkies, we're done. And that comes to the one-on-ones, the individual crisis intervention. And that's going to be a first responder that we afford this intervention to. It can be any time. It can be at the event, after the event, 2 days after the event, 2 months after the event. It's symptom driven. What that generally means is that we've been teaching all of you, the people watching these, we've been teaching everybody to pay attention to each other and notice these symptoms. Well, that may be that somebody has come up or called and said, you know, Timmy's really struggling. I think somebody should reach out to Timmy. And that's where a peer support person can reach out to Timmy.
And reiterate again, what are the signs and symptoms that we should be looking for?
Boy, that was like an hour's worth of signs and symptoms.
Yeah.
How about, well,
to pound it in.
to pound it in, we're going to do that on the phone.
Okay.
When we do our Zoom call, we're going to pound in a bunch of them. But in general, we see changes in their behavior. We see somebody that used to be outgoing that suddenly is withdrawn. We see somebody that used to be involved in a lot and now suddenly they're involved in nothing. We see somebody that was just involved normally and now all of a sudden they're going to every drinking event known. We see somebody that used to make really good decisions and now they're just not making good decisions, or they're not making decisions at all. We see somebody, Josh, what were some of the others? We see somebody Eating habits have changed. They just don't want to eat.
This isn't the same Timmy that I knew a month ago.
This is not the same. That's a perfect way to know it. Timmy's struggling. This is not the same guy. And we want to notice that in each other. And the most drastic is people will say, I just don't even know why I do this stuff anymore. It's just not worth it. None of this is life isn't worth it anymore. Why get up every morning? That's a big sign that we need to be looking at hard. We want to return them to function. How long does an individual crisis take? That's very dependent. I can tell you, as peer support, one of the problems that comes up that we have to be very aware of is this person, especially if they're reaching out, and we like to reach out in person because it's a lot better to look somebody in the eye and talk to them than it is to talk to them on the phone or texting, because you don't get the same feedback. The problem is oftentimes they're drinking and they want to talk, and 8 hours later you're exhausted and you're wanting to fall asleep, but they're still talking and you're trying to help. And so we have to be very aware of the fact that we have to have the ability to say, hey, it's really late, you need to get some sleep, and I'll check back with you tomorrow, or here's my phone number, you can call me tomorrow. We need to be able to cut that off. And that's a difficult thing to do because we want to help and we don't want to leave them. If we think that we can't leave them for safety reasons, we need to get someone else involved, because you can, in a one-on-one, get to the point where, again, 8 or 9 hours later, they're still going over the same thing again and again and again and again and again, and we're not getting anywhere. We're not accomplishing anything. We're wearing ourselves out. But we just need to try and get them to go to bed, and call us the next day. Again, you want that to be a neutral environment. We're not going to meet somebody at a bar to have a little one-on-one with them. And I say that, I suppose you could meet them there and then go sit in the parking lot, if it's distraction free. But what you don't want to do is meet them in a public place and try and have a conversation in a public place, or at their house when their kids are running around, with you, in and out and in and out. It's just, that's not going to help.
Can't be distractions.
There can't be distractions. The safer model is in the individual crisis intervention. What we're trying to do is stabilize them. We're trying to, you're grinning.
I'm saying about something.
Okay. That's quite all right.
Just happy.
I thought I, stuttered again.
No.
We want to acknowledge the crises, which might be, we're telling them, boy, I can understand why you're so distraught. This was horrible. Acknowledge the crises. The facility and understanding of it. Again, I can certainly understand why you're so upset about this. Encourage effective coping. Give them some of those things. Hey, you used to run all the time. Have you been running lately? Well, maybe tomorrow you should start running again. Maybe you don't have to run far, but run a half a mile or something. Encourage them to do things that are healthy for them. If they've never run in their life, don't encourage them to go running.
Don't tell them you look like you haven't been running.
That would probably not be a good way to word it.
Okay, good.
Just middle note.
Write that down.
Middle note.
I can tell you haven't been running.
Or I can tell you have not lost your appetite. Yeah, those are probably not the things you want to say. What we're trying to lead them to is recovery or referral. And that's especially the person that, whether it's 7 hours later or 15 minutes into it, when you realize this person is probably beyond my capacity as a peer support. This is somebody that needs professional help. Yeah. And we give them credibility to the professional help, which is why we really like and need mental health on the team, because we can say, hey, I know Susie is part of the team, and we've worked with her, and she's worked with a lot of first responders that are in the same situation as you, and maybe you should just give her a call. You're giving credibility to that person, and we can't make them call. Now, we can encourage them. We can give them the phone number. We can check back the next day and say, hey, did you ever call, whomever? That's what we're trying to do. So we're not there to be therapists. Therapy is long-term. Remember we talked about that. Therapy is long-term. We're short-term. We're just trying to stabilize the situation, get them heading in the right direction, give them some tools so that they can get back on the path. Family CISM, that would be the first responder and their family members. And where this typically will come up, and it's not really a one-on-one, but it's not a group scenario. In other words, it might be that, what's a scenario that a first responder, a paramedic goes to the death of a child, and they have small children of their own, and they're really struggling with it, and they're going home, and now they're starting to have some marital fights with their significant other because they're not letting the kids even walk outside because they're holding on to those kids. They don't want them to get hurt. That may be where we go and sit with mom and dad and even the kids and say, hey, I know that, mom or dad has been kind of extra.
They've been extra.
They've been extra watchful of you, protective. They've been overly protective of you lately, or higher to temper. They've been quicker to temper. Well, this is what they're going through. This is maybe what happened at work, and those are normal reactions to it. And sometimes when we can talk to the family as peers, not as counselors, we're not therapists, but as peers, we can say, gosh, been there and done that. I can remember, going home and telling Jeff, he needs to do this, and 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 this, because I had a bad day. And that's not fair to our spouses. On the other hand, our spouses need to understand that what we do is not normal. We get exposed to abnormal situations, so our reactions to it are normal reactions to abnormal situations. So that's what the family CISM is about. We're not marriage counselors. We're not going in there to, solve 15 years of marital problems. What we're trying to do is allow the family to ask questions about first responders and what we're subjected to and why they may be suddenly quicker to temper, or why they may not let us, go to the parties that all the other kids get to go to, and all of that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's symptom driven or event driven. It could be either one. We're just trying to foster communication, maybe some closure, maybe some mitigation, so that we can get them back to whatever normal was before that event occurred. Community and organizational, we kind of talked about this with the CMB. Anytime that we do a CMB, we want to have a representative of the community. So that would be the mayor, the sheriff, somebody that represents the community, and then a peer support, so that we can foster communication, that we can get everybody together and say, yeah, I don't think you realize that people are really suffering, and maybe we can talk about that so that we can foster some mitigation and maybe some closure. Pastoral, that'd be you, Josh. Often what we find, what is that saying in the military was there's no atheist in a foxhole? Often what we find in critical events is one or more of the people are pretty angry at God. Because and the people that don't even believe in God are like, see, this is proof, because if there was really a God, he would never have let this happen. So there's just a lot of spiritual things that come up. And back to, we're not mental health people. We're not psychotherapists. We're also not pastors, priests, chaplains. I'm not really sure what all the different ones are. We're not clergy. They're the experts on that. That's who we want to have come to answer those questions and have those discussions about crises of faith. If they were faithful before, we don't want them to lose that. If they weren't faithful before, then we're certainly not preaching, and we're certainly the pastoral intervention is not about converting people, but it is about hope. It's about spiritual closure. So that's what the pastor on the team. That's why that's the important third link. We have peer support, we have pastoral support, we have mental health support, and we need all three. It's that combination that makes this work. Follow-up referrals. We can follow up, we can offer follow-up information to individuals, to families, to the whole group if we're at a diffusing. We can do it anytime. It's usually symptom-driven. In other words, we're not going to be following up on, I'm trying to think of what, we've already done our diffusing, we've done our initial follow-up. We're not going to continue to follow up, for a year. If there's no symptoms, then there's no real reason for us to continue.
Call me 8 months later. I told you last month, I'm fine.
Right.
I told you the 6th month and the 5th month, I'm doing fine.
I just had to file this harassing phone call report because, it's enough.
The number you've called blocked you.
That's we don't want to block. Again, how long does it last? It's varied, but 8 months later, probably they need professional help if they need it. Now, that's not to say that we run into somebody 8 months later,
right,
and we say, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" That's a great way.
You're not going out of your way to search them out.
Correct. You didn't call them to ask them that. You just ran into them, and then it's a nice, just informal follow-up.
And around here, like you said, we're going to see the same kinds of people. So some of the same people might even be at a debriefing and afterwards be like, hey, remember the one that we did a year ago? I was doing really well until 3 weeks ago, or I was doing really well until tonight, and that all brought up last time,
right,
or whatever. So,
and we know that that's real.
Yeah.
That they could have dealt with it and been coping with it very well, and then an event occurred, maybe even a seemingly insignificant event, but something occurred that brought all that back up to them.
Yeah.
And certainly if they reach out, well, we're right here, and that would probably be a one-on-one in that scenario. What you'll find in CISM is one-on-one is the most used. That is the most frequent intervention that is used. It is also probably the most specialized. There's a complete course on doing one-on-ones because how you do a group intervention and how you do an individual intervention, totally different. Group intervention will not work with an individual, and the individual intervention model will not work with a group. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct model when you do those interventions. There's a whole lot of different types of interventions. You can see it's very complex. It's a peer support. It's designed and utilized by peers to offer the support. Nobody should be involved in doing it unless they're trained to do it. We definitely would not just go off the street and go, well, we can't find enough team members, so we're just going to grab a couple, good people to help us because they're not trained. They shouldn't be doing it. I'm one ahead of you. I just want you to know. I
was
jumped
lost
ahead.
in the wisdom of what you were saying.
You're so funny. I found a little video to break up the plague. You lost too?
Oh no, the wisdom part. Yeah.
What I want everybody to do when you're viewing this video, think about not so much what the video is about, because it's kind of, you'll see, it's got a little comic value to it. But think about the emotions that are generated in the video, not just the emotions from your own personal experiences, and then the emotions of the people that are involved in the video, what they would be going through. Because we've been talking about interventions, we've been talking about looking for signs and symptoms of stress. So look at the video with that in mind. And just as a sidebar, there might be a couple people in the video that you look at and you go, oh, that I know who that is. That reminds me of so-and-so that is right here in this community. So we're going to end this now, and when the video is over, you're done. Unless you guys have something you want to add.
No.
So enjoy the video.
Firefighters at the station, listen as the tone goes out. Fire alarms activated and the building is showing smoke, and so the engine rolls to trouble again. There's people at the scene just watching, people running out for their lives. The firefighters get there and help them out and go looking for more inside, 'cause that's just what they do, these women and men. 'Cause they made a promise and here they come, someone hurt and called 911, and the siren saying hope is on the way. There's a hero racing to help a stranger today. Saturday night in the city, the cruiser gets a dispatch call. Little girl says her daddy's mad and drank a bunch of alcohol, and so they head away into trouble again. People at the house are screaming, and someone yells he's got a gun. A little girl full of panic cries out, "Daddy, don't you shoot my mom." And that's where the cops come in, these women and men. 'Cause they made a promise and here they come, someone heard and called 911, and the siren saying hope is on the way. There's a hero racing to help a stranger today. When people in the world need saving, the saviors who answer the call don't get paid anymore for danger, or get to pick the ones they want. They just go to where the few will go, maybe lay it all on the line as they do their job. Do it one more time. 'Cause they made a promise and here they come, someone heard and called 911, and the siren saying hope is on the way. There's a hero racing to help a stranger today. There's a hero racing to help a stranger